Best way I can think about that is the cities that I've lived in and that have had a direct impact on my path. And so Los Angeles, California, which is where I was born and grew up. Next would be Syracuse, New York. That's where I went to school at Syracuse University. I also lived in Florence, Italy, studied abroad, and that had a big impact on my life. I went to New Orleans, Louisiana to create the first graduate program in museum studies for the state of Louisiana, and came to Jackson, Mississippi by way of New Orleans, Louisiana. And so that really, the stories that go along with those cities, but that's the path that brought me here. Well, this partnership between Tougaloo College and the Mississippi Museum of Art began in the 1960s, and that was a relationship that was forged out of art. There was a group of people that were collecting art that would eventually be the Mississippi Museum of Art. And at Tougaloo College, there were art programs, art classes, an art colony, and so a whole culture around art that was happening at Tougaloo College. And even during that time, there was actually some communication between people who wanted to talk about art, who wanted to expand the conversation beyond the discourse that was happening regarding civil rights. And so there would be meetings and gatherings on campus from people from different walks of life, black and white, at Tougaloo College to discuss art. At one point in time, there was a young man who was attending Oberlin College and had a conversation with his sister who lived in New York about the interest in art that was happening at Tougaloo College. And so he got his sister and her friends involved in starting to donate art to the college. And so the collection began to grow beyond that during that particular time, although the ground was fertile because there was already an interest and activity around the arts at the time. So significantly in the around 1963, 64, this group of New York artists, art collectors, art critics started donating art to Tougaloo College, and that's when the collection really started to flourish and grow. And then subsequently, artists donated works to the collection, and the university also purchased work. And so from the 1960s to today, the collection has continued to grow and play a significant role, not just in Mississippi, but in other states and around the world. Well, in my capacity as curator of art and civil rights, I've been, my responsibility is to create exhibitions and programs using work from both collections for one show. And so when it came to the prize, it's the third of the shows that I've curated since I've been here. And I really wanted to do something that my thought process was about not just looking back at what had happened during the 60s, but to make some links and connections between what was happening currently. In 2018 was really at the time when I started thinking about the exhibition. And so in that kind of thinking about what was the most direct connect to the past, especially in terms of art and civil rights and creative expression, I started thinking about music. And I am really interested in song lyrics. I've always been interested in lyrics. So it wasn't just about the sound of the music, but it was about the words that were being said. And so the idea came together pretty solidly in terms of wanting to have images and lyrics. And then the process that grew out of that was, what lyrics, what images would be. But that was really the core concept for the show. Well, the reason that I chose the Tracy Sugarman images are because of the way that the story is being told in those particular images. They are sketches from photographs that he took during his visit to Mississippi in 1964, during a time that is popularly known as Freedom Summer. And I chose the etchings that he's done because photographs, to me, they can stop an image or capture a moment in time, and the sketches allow a little bit more movement, or they're more accessible to me in terms of being able to interpret the time itself. So it's not just this moment that's captured in the photograph, it's also, the difference between the pen going out a little bit further or softening, or how the shading is done. And so when I think about that, I think about when I say accessibility, the comfort level that someone has looking at a sketch as opposed to a photograph. And knowing that I was going to be pairing the images along with music, which is even more accessible because, most of us have a song in our head at any given time, or if, something that you can sing along to. So those are the kinds of things I mean about accessibility, that it's welcoming, it's comforting. And so pairing those two things together in order to be able to address something such as the civil rights movement, and then also very relatable to something that is very much a part of our daily lives today with music. And I feel that with songs that have been expressed, that have been used to express creative expression, freedom of speech, really just being heard, that the continuum through the decades from the 1950s all the way to 2018 is song lyrics. Is the place that people have been able to really say what they're feeling or speak about how they're feeling, and in so many different aspects of life, but particularly this one with civil rights. Well, the first, there's a lecture that Harry Allen is conducting called Shooting the Enemy, and that lecture is happening this evening at Tougaloo College. There's also 2 other public lectures that will happen in the gallery space, and those are taking place in November. And so part of the lecture that's happening with Mr. Allen is a part of the Art and Civil Rights Initiative lecture series, and that is, there's a person that's invited to speak to each exhibition that's been curated. And so that's the capacity that he's serving in. And then there's also, the museum has what's called gallery talks, which are 30-minute conversations that take place in the gallery space itself with the curator. And so I'll be participating in 2 of those type of lectures as well. The whole idea is that when I talk about freedom of speech by way of song lyrics, when you come into the space, there's protest signs, there's picket signs. And so you have a fist with a sign in it, and instead of what you may have seen on a sign during a protest rally in the 60s, there's song lyrics on there. So coming in, the idea of, there's a Childish Gambino quote is on the wall. And so that's pulled from his song, This Is America. And so it's putting the voice to the sign. And there's also a blank sign that allows you to be able to think, what would you put in that sign? If you had a picket sign in your hand today, or if you were wanting to make a statement and that was the means of statement that you were using, not, modern technology. I understand that we have an opportunity to convey messages at a faster rate, and, but if you just had a sign and you just had a certain amount of space to make a statement about what you wanted to make, which is what was happening in the 60s, this is what this is about, and and imagining being able to put those kinds of statements or those lyrics or those words onto a picket sign. So when you come into the space, I think it's I go back to saying it's accessible because it's very straightforward in terms of how the work is presented. It's inviting you to read what is being sung, or relate to the lyrics in a way that takes them outside of connecting with the melody, connecting with the music, but that you actually see the poetry in the words that are written. And I think that allows that perspective gives more power to what's actually being said. There's also an audio component. There's two different ways to access playlists. There's a playlist on the Mississippi Museum of Art app, which you can access on the website. That app also has background information on the artists and the songs, and there's also videos there. And then there's also a playlist on Spotify. So while you can read the lyrics, see the images, you can also listen at your leisure. You may want to listen to the music while you're in the space, or you may want to read the lyrics, look at the images, and then go back and listen to the music and reflect on it in a different space. Well, the contribution directly to the show would come from our interns. We have an internship program with the Art and Civil Rights Initiative, and we have currently 4 interns in those positions. And when I started conceptualizing the show, I actually had conversations with my interns and asked them in what they thought about it, what they thought about the ideas, those kinds of things. And so I feel like they were there from the concept of it coming together, and then working with the information that's in the show. One of the interns worked with helping pull the music together for the playlist. But I also, going over the checklist, selecting work, selecting songs, they were a part of each phase of that, because it was an opportunity with the different exhibitions that I've done to show them from concept to installation what that looks like. They'll also be involved in having some talks in the gallery space as well, participating in that capacity as well. And then just on the support side for everything else that goes along with the show, publicizing, marketing, they're involved with that. They're involved with the lecture, with that information being disseminated. There will be a couple tonight on program who will be introducing Harry Allen. So really, they're my team. I mean, my capacity as curator of art and civil rights is a department of one. And so just as I interface with all the different departments of the museum and work together as a team with my colleagues here at the museum, the interns are really a main part of my team at Tougaloo College, along with my colleague Terry Fluker and Mark Dial, who is digitizing the collection. His lecture is the complementary lecture component to the exhibition. For all 3 of the exhibitions that I have curated, there is a lecture that goes along with it. So when I curated Meditation on a Movement, we invited Dr. Kelly Willits in, who's an art educator, and she did a lecture at Tougaloo College and also here at the Mississippi Museum of Art, and sharing her expertise and perspective on the show and interpreting. And so part of Mr. Allen, his participation, he's presenting the lecture, but he's also, I was really so excited that he agreed to come and join us here because of his perspective and insight that he could give to really what the subject matter is about, and that's about freedom of expression in lyrics, in imagery, in the written word as well. And so with his background in journalism, in photography, this was an opportunity to have somebody, and also with social activism, really having documented one of the most significant hip-hop bands that has existed, and that's Public Enemy, with having a platform visually, creatively, musically, artistically for people to really not just express what they were feeling, but to express what they know. There was a lot of information that was disseminated, knowledge, historical knowledge, by way of this group. And so I'm looking, I wanted him to come and talk about those intersections where he saw freedom of speech during the civil rights movement and freedom of speech during really the height of the hip hop movement. I can say hip hop movement, but during hip hop music, which really was playing, it was a continuum of civil rights activism. It's important to know that the conversation about civil rights and talking about the civil rights movement era in the 60s is not something to be afraid of. There's so many times that to me it's been presented as an era of time that's something to be scared or ashamed, or it's emotionally charged. It's a period of time that existed, it's well documented, and there's an opportunity to learn about what happened during that period of time, but it's also an opportunity to learn about what's happened in the intermediate and also what's happening, how that's still impacting us today. And so one of the reasons why I didn't choose photography, I chose sketches, is that it loosens up that area of time where it's not so much a historical documentation of it, but an opportunity to revisit what's happened, but to be solidly, in what's happening today, and not just looking back, but also looking within. And so my intention for, what I would want people to take away is reflecting on a period of time, but spending a whole lot of time thinking about what's happening in their life today, how you're able to express yourself, how you're able to talk, how you're able to speak, how we communicate, and then also a little bit of time thinking about what the next steps are. And that's actually built into a space in the exhibition because there's a wall that has you contemplating. It's an image that's paired with the Temptation song, Ball of Confusion. And with the line, that's what the world is today. I would like people to think about what the world is for them today, what that looks like. And also to understand that, we talk about how chaotic things are, in this day and age, but we've gotten through challenging times in this country before. And maybe it's an opportunity to say that there's a way out, or that there's a future on the other side, because maybe, people felt how they're feeling now in the 60s, and look where we've come. And so I would want people to take away, some opportunity for, belief in a future that it goes beyond the chaos. And I really am smiling because I'm thinking about the song that ends with the Sugarman Pieces is Optimistic by the group Sounds of Blackness. And it's a really very positive, uplifting message that's in there. And so really that's the bottom line of what it's all about. You can reflect without getting stuck in the reflection, and you can still imagine that there are great opportunities in life ahead.